they're in the adolescent stage, they don't eat trees. It's only when they are full wings and all. This attracts them, and then they'll go into this apartment that can go into the staff.
So yeah, I know Jack. Yeah, actually I have this.
Because we have one.
Part were also congregants of the church, including Count Basie. So yeah, this was his church, and he often used to be. There's stories of him. A lot of church locals used to his house in the swimming pool on hot summer days. So he used to open up his place. Was the first African American to move into the neighborhood. And as I mentioned earlier, the story was a white police officer owned his house, and he was having issues with his neighbors. And in order to get back at the neighbors, what he did was he rented out his house. He let them live here. And that started a whole chain of things when it comes to interracial things happening in the community. But if it wasn't for Fats Waller coming here, a lot of other musicians. Was he grew up from Chicago. He grew up in Chicago and played bass with many legendary figures from the 1920s to the mid-1930s. He was with Cab Calloway from 1936 to 1941 and worked with Dizzy Gillespie in modernizing Calloway's music. So what he did was, after they left here, they moved to Brooklyn Heights and lived where Arthur Miller's house residence was. That's where they moved to. W.B. Du Bois had a number of addresses. He has an address in Harlem, not far from where I live. And a lot of times, they spent maybe 4 or 6 years in these residences. So when I'm looking up addresses, I'm like, multiple. Like I told you, when one person left, I was the first one to really do that. And she also worked as a field director for the NAACP and opened up branches throughout the nation. She in W.B. Du Bois' later years, he left the United States and moved to Africa, and that's where he passed away at too, because he.
对这些脚就是我家小径那边还有，但我第一次来这块儿。哦，像这个房子都是荷兰式的老建筑，已经很少见了，很漂亮。所以你看那个了师兄，你看到。 包括它这种门，就是跟一个小亭子一样的这种门，就是德国都特式建筑，英国都特式建筑绿的。这个棕色就是德国式，你看它跟一个小亭子一样。这是一种特殊的那种德国人的那种建筑风格。你今天可能也就是去到杯赛小径可能都没有，然后就是这里了。哎，非常漂亮。这种1920年到1930年的这种建筑风格已经是。 很少见，而且你看到它街牌，只要是这种我叫麻酱色的，就跟我们吃的那个麻酱一样。你看到只要在纽约市看那种麻酱色的街牌，这个都是历史剧。哦，对，你到华尔街啊什么的，你都能看得到。OK。
Where the pool stood. This is the Pope from Archie Springer. It gives me pleasure to know that my home is located in a place that brought Count Basie and others so much joy. So. They named a school in the area after Count and Catherine Basie called Middle School 72. And it stands as a constant reminder of the couple's civic and charitable contributions to the world. So this is where Count Basie was from 1946 till about the late 60s, early 70s. They were here for a long time. This picture right here is a picture of Count Basie and his wife in the home. So this is Count Basie and this is his wife Catherine, and this is a picture of them in the home, possibly in the 50s and 60s. So, and they were very, like I said, they were very big into the church. Catherine Basie and a couple of others there to show you this is what it was, as opposed to me telling you this, because I could be telling you anything, you know. No, I kid, of course, but no. Hopefully, in a few years, we'll be able to see more plaques on the different houses of the people who were here.
邀请整个社区的人到他这边做 pool parties 温泉游泳池的派对。
Across the street, 112-15, which means nothing to me.
Well, the 112 is 112th Street.
Well, this says 175th.
Because this is 175th Street. So the Queens numbering system, as was explained to me before, the reason why it's so complicated is because of the different neighborhoods that was here. There was numbering systems that had to be put in place because each neighborhood had the same street names at one point in time. So if you go to a neighborhood like Jackson Heights, you'll see the old addresses and the new addresses on the homes. It'll say something like 83 West 25th Street, and then the new one will say 83-something 37th Avenue. And Jackson Heights, I've seen a lot of those homes, they still have the original street names, and then they have the new names that was. If you're dealing with private residences, that's probably where the difficulty would lie. But I would think people are starting to do more. I've been seeing a lot more historic designation over the last few years since the pandemic. A lot more that's been happening. So it's a process, you know. And then there are cases where you have to state the cause, go to your council person, let them know why this is important. So long after Duke Ellington had passed away. So Mercer is the one with the saxophone, of course. Actually, this is a good story that I can tell you. So we just got Duke Ellington's apartment in Harlem, St. Nicholas Avenue, just got landmarked. The designated building just got designated as well, and it's because of Duke Ellington's residence. So this is recently, a few months ago. So this is one of the newly acquired designations. And Van Gogh was a very big golf fan, and that's where we used to go to golf. So I was having a nice conversation with one of the groundskeepers, if you will, a couple of days ago, and he was telling me that Ruth didn't own the house. He just knew people who lived here, and he would often make this his place to come and visit. And this was like his getaway. This is where he got away from home. So this is where they moved. This is while he was during his heyday in the 80s. So this is probably about 20 years prior to when Count Basie. That's why. 20 years prior. Sure. And this building was originally completed in 1929. It's an 11-room, 3-bathroom English Tudor home. It was sold to the Fifth Avenue Real Estate Company, Landon. Joe Lewis, he fell in love with Rose Morgan after his divorce in 1949. Lewis was, when he lived here, he was going through a lot. He was suffering from bad investments, and he was being chased by the IRS. So when he purchased the home, he purchased it under Rose Morgan's name. Huh? Rose Morgan. Yes, the Rose. Not that Morgan family. No. Not that Rose Morgan.
Modern Morgan.
Yeah, not yet. That JP was looking for him. That would be interesting, right? Like you're dating my great-granddaughter? No, I'm teasing, but no. But no.
It was like you're in trouble with money.
So they got married in 1955, but by 1958 they had annulled their marriage because Lewis did not want to have any children. So, but Rose Morgan continued to hold on to the house, and very wealthy, very independent. So Joe Lewis pretty much used her as a means of support. So I love those backstories because there's always something behind the story. We know about Joe Lewis, but what do you know about Rose Moore? And that's where I do my research and go, oh my gosh, she's more interesting than Joe Louis. And we know Joe Louis was, during the 1930s, the Great Depression, he was the symbol for Black excellence. There are so many people who were named after Joe Louis during that time because of his fights and his battles. My dad was named after Joe Louis in the 1940s. Anybody who was born Great Depression, World War I, if your name is Joseph, you were named after Joe Louis. Right. My dad was named after Joe Louis. And then that means, in reality, I'm also named after Joe Louis, right? Because my name is Joe Jr., so that's how that goes. You see how I make the stories connect and make it work? So now we're going to walk up Murdoch Avenue to the next block, and we're going to go to the house of, he's responsible for a lot of great music that came out. He was a soul singer with a gospel background. He had 4 top 20 hits in 1959, including Thank You, Pretty Baby. Brook Benton also had 21 gold discs in 4 years, from 1959 to 1963. His house was built in 1940, and he was a member of the, he was a congregate member of the nearby Carter Community AME Church, which was on 176th Street, sorry, 167th Street. Brooke Benton died of pneumonia in Mary Immaculate Hospital, which is in Jamaica, Queens, on April 9th, 1988. So he was one of those tenants that would have been here during the influx of everybody. So I know he did a lot of work with James Brown in the 60s. You know, he's on that same scale in regards to R&B. But he also worked with people like Dinah Washington. He worked with people like Billy Eckstein. So he's not just a musician for one genre. He was a musician for many genres. And his legacy, this is where he lives. There was a picture I was trying to find of him on bicycles with his kids in front of the house, and I couldn't find it. And it was right here on the street, and I was trying to find it. And this is just a... This was the residence of Jackie and Rachel Robinson. They were here from 1949 to 1957. This is how long they were here in Addersley Park. While Jackie Robinson was here, this is when he was at his heyday during the Dodgers. This is when they won the championship. This is when Jackie had 3 addresses that's known in New York. 520 McDonald in Brooklyn, Bed-Stuy. He also lived at 5224 Tilden in Flatbush. And this was his 3rd address that he moved to in New York before. After retiring, they moved to Stamford, Connecticut. If you've never been to the Jackie Robinson Museum, you must go. On Barrack Street. I was able to go last year when it first opened up, and it was amazing. And then kudos to Rachel, who's still around. Rachel just turned 101 last month. Oh, she's still alive. And still, the Jackie Robinson Foundation is still doing great work. They're responsible for getting the museum on Barrack Street open. So Rachel is still here kicking, so, you know, telling her story and telling Jackie's story as well. And, you know, you don't see life from somebody's eyes unless the people who knew them and that person themselves. And the fact that she's still able to tell his story in a way that he would have wanted to be told is great. Because there's so much in that museum. If you thought you knew about Jackie Robinson, you wouldn't. Another personal story. My paternal grandfather was born in Macon, Georgia. He was a Negro Leagues baseball player. He played in the 1940s and 50s. He played with people like Larry Doby. He played with Josh Gibson at the end of their careers. He didn't get to play with Jackie, but after Jackie integrated the league, there was just so much. Like, he was a hero to so many people, including my grandfather. My grandfather talked about him religiously. Like, Jackie was one of his favorite players because he opened the door for so many players. My grandfather didn't make it to the pros, but his legacy was so renowned when he passed away. So many baseball players came to his funeral because he died at almost 90 years old and was still out in Newark. There's a park named after him, and he was the groundkeeper of that park until he died. And so many baseball players came, current ones, was like, you did so much for me, you helped me with the game, and I was just so impressed. Like, I knew that he was big in baseball, but I didn't know how big he was. And I was able to, the only thing I have of my grandfather's is one of his old Negro Leagues caps with the Newark Eagles logo on it. So, and that will stay in my possession until, and I love the Mills Brothers because they were like one of the first doo-wop trio groups that really made it big. So, and there's a lot of groups like the Mills Brothers, the Ink Spots. Those are the groups that were really big and doo-wop for their time. And then after them, you had all these other groups that came in, like the Dells, the Platters, all those groups that came in the 50s. But the Mills Brothers was one of the first of the doo-wop singing groups that really made it big. And this was, like, as I mentioned, this is Herbert Mills, and this building was his residence. Two of my favorite Mills Brothers songs, Paper Doll and Opus 1. So if you've ever heard those songs, those two.
What years was he here?
Herbert Mills, he was here during his heyday, so he was here in the 50s and 60s. Like once they got big and broke big, like this is where everybody moved to. Like this is during their successful years. So.
How do you like this vacant lot over here?
The heyday of her career. Another story, a personal story with Lena Horne. My mom and dad were never married, right? So they were happy, I like to say, on a couple of occasions when they had me and my brothers. That's the only time they were happy. But one of the things I will always talk to them about individually, when did y'all ever have fun together? And the one time they could always tell me was when they met Lena Horne at Central Park in 1978. And they had her autograph. That's the only time. And it was like I laughed because I wasn't expecting that, and I was expecting something different. And they both said the same thing. I said, "Now, if y'all both knew, and that's the only time y'all can remember where y'all had the most fun, really." And they both said it like at different times. Like when we met Lena Horne in the late '70s, I said, "Okay." I said, "Well, that was a good time." So thank you, Lena Horne, for making my parents happy. Right? There you go. So now what we're going to do is we're going to go to the residence of a couple of older jazz musicians, some that were not as known, but left just as much of a durable impact on their arts, okay? So we have about, 4 more locations, okay? Was a jazz musician that was born in Oklahoma. He died in Rochester, New York, 1965. He was voted the best alto saxophonist in the 1959 Playboy magazine Jazz Book. Earl Bostic first worked as a sideman to Lionel Hampton, Cab Calloway, and Don Redman, until he formed his own band in 1945. Starting in jazz with swing music, he wound up in rhythm and blues. His music was praised by his peers, including John Coltrane. Bostic's sax work can be heard on popular tunes such as Harlem Nocturnes and Flamingos. So those are two of his pieces where you can hear Earl Bostic's work. But he wasn't as well known as a Coltrane or a Lionel Hampton. But, you know, this neighborhood, it's interesting because you don't know their legacy, but you know they were here. So how many more that we don't know about were here? Not from the most popular, but from the less popular as well. So I find that very interesting.
Can I ask, does anybody know who these people were? Who have a...
David and Renee Bluetooth. I don't know.
That's all right.
I don't know, but I try to find out a little history on them. But they were from, I'm going to make an estimated guess, doing this long enough, they were longtime residents of St. Albans, and they probably lived on this block at one point in time. Because usually when you get a street named after you in a neighborhood like this, you probably lived here. I don't know which one, but they probably lived in this section somewhere. That's going to be my educated guess.
To the property where we can put actual dates on the homes and tell you when. So my mother's been here since 1958. She's one of the oldest residents, and she came from Liberia with her family, actually from America, married a Liberian, moved back here, and they're still in that house in that block. Wow. They've been here 50 years as well. So you want to get all of that. That way you're doing it in consortium, because otherwise we don't know what's going on, and we're really trying to hold the neighborhood. So when I see blocks of people going changing and shifting the faces, so they got the street name for them. So far Scarborough is also a form of similar name. We need to summer, you can give a book, take a book. We have a white party in August at some time. So you definitely come. We'll meet all the electors because they always like to come and try to get the votes.
So the big house on the hill is our home, but it was the Colonel Pendry, who was one of the highest ranking in the area in the Navy, because that was the hospital was a naval supply hospital. And so I recently Googled and found all these articles about them because we're trying to document the home. And when they made this neighborhood a historical society, they actually used our home as one of the examples to
when you see the house, it's huge on 3 lots, and it was right down from the Navy hospital, so you could walk and go to work. So, yeah, lots of that good stuff. A judge lived in our house. We have a wall that's this thick full of sand. So the owner before that was not illegal, was a criminal, and we think their bodies in there.
And we have a ghost.
And they have a ghost. So
We have
the
a ghost
neighborhood has a lot of different interesting
Aspects.
Yeah, it's fun. And you'll get to see a lot of different people and things and homes and stuff. You have all the facts?
I have a lot of them, but you're giving me a lot more. I think we've learned more from you than the last hour.
I'm scan of things, so I'm like, is there a because sand keeps pouring. We are looking forward to that in the holidays. So what I asked Starbucks, because it gets so warm, if we can just kind of close it out. During the white party, they bring all the old cars out from the neighborhood. And so you got all these like vehicles lined up, and you're kind of testing those out, and you're getting the elders out, so mom's telling stories. So we hope to do a holiday thing. I did a caroling thing, it was like 5 of us.
Keep doing it.
We could keep caroling, but it would be lovely to do open house. Because some of these tutors are amazing. Some have been gutted and totally renovated, but some of them are unbelievably intact, like the way they were built.
Yeah, mural. Illinois Jacot is one of the members that's here. And he was the second longest member of that era that was here. Illinois died in 2000. It's so much that his brother, Russell, lived in the house next to him. So Russell lived here, and Illinois Jacot lived here. Here's a picture of Illinois.
Is Russell also a musician?
No, Russell was not a musician, but Illinois was. But I guess he just had family next to him. Illinois is actually buried at Woodlawn Cemetery in the Bronx. That is the cemetery to go to if you want to know about the jazz history in New York. Miles Davis is buried there. Lionel Hampton's buried there. Oh my gosh, Celia Cruz is buried there. Like, yeah, Woodlawn Cemetery is where most of the jazz musicians are buried. But this is an early, I guess, a shot of Illinois Jacot. So now another house that I'm trying to find, or not trying to find, but we're gonna go there. Last house we're gonna go to is who I consider to be the first lady of jazz. If y'all know who it is, maybe I'm home too, you know? They were here from the 1953 to 1967. Sorry, 1949 to 1967. This is where they were here from. This is a statement from Illinois Jacot. I was so delighted when Ella moved here. I could go up to her bar at her house and drink up all of her whiskey and then go to somebody else's yard and go home. Because Illinois lived right around the corner. So this is where Ella lived in the 40s and 50s. So this was her home, and when she was with Ray Brown. They divorced, and then she kept the house until 1967. So the story of Ella Fitzgerald, why we call her the first lady of jazz, is because of that song. A tisket, a tasket, I lost my yellow basket. And the story is, when she was on the stage of the Apollo Theater, amateur night, she forgot the words to the song. So that's why she started singing Tisket a Tasket, and then she started to scat. And that won her the amateur night. So that was why Ella, you know, from there, people hear about the scatting, and that was how Ella Fitzgerald started her career in the jazz. And she's probably, outside of Billie Holiday, the most recorded female jazz singer of all time. It's probably Ella, and then it's Billie Holiday. So we're gonna walk back down to the summer night. I would love to take a picture of us in front of the mirror, and then that's where we'll finish the tour.
The train station.
Yep, and the train station's right there. Okay, and that's where we're gonna finish. Is that okay? Yep. All right, so we'll take a picture from the mural. Yes.
Prior to living here, she lived on Ditmars Boulevard.
In Astoria.
Across from the LaGuardia Airport. Her house is still there.
Oh, really?
It's still there, and it's one of the, you know, the website, the 6 to Celebrate.
Yes.
Yeah,
it's in that.
It's one of the 6 to Celebrate for that part of Elmhurst.
Really?
And we have a panoramic photo of her house overlooking the bay, which is now the Grand.